Well, we started a series last week, very short series called Snapchat, and if you're over 25 and don't know what that is, that's just that social media app where teens and tweens take pictures or drawings or whatever and send it to friends. It's only up there for a short time, the information, then it disappears. And so we kind of just said, let's take a quick snap, that's what those are called, snap of what friendship looks like from a biblical perspective. And you remember last week we talked about how our friends determine the quality and direction of our lives. They influence how we go, what we do. And that's why it's important, as we looked at the one verse in Proverbs, that we choose wise people to be around. Because the wise person knows that life is connected. They know that what I do today determines what happens tomorrow and what happens a year from now. And so you want to hang around someone who's wise and knows that life is connected, rather than the foolish who they know the difference between right and wrong, but they just don't care. And because they don't care about their lives, they won't care about yours either, and eventually you will suffer the shrapnel of the explosion that happens in their lives. So you want to make sure that you choose wise friends to be around. They understand that what you do today affects what you do tomorrow. So that's what we did last week, and we're going to kind of close this out today in talking about true friends. Now, over the years, Hollywood has given us some great sitcoms about friends. Okay, I thought it would be fun if I tested your knowledge on this and see how well you know these. And I'm going to put up a picture of the cast of a show, and I want to see if you can guess what show it is, okay? All right, we'll see who watches TV too much. All right, here's the first one. Can you tell me what this is? Happy Days. Happy Days, yes. How about this one? Golden Girls, okay. This one? Okay, I can tell our audience is getting a little older. Okay, what's the next one? How about this one? Cheers, that's where you want to go, where everybody knows your name, right? Good. How about this one? Boy Meets World. Yes, Morgan, you watch too much TV, hon. Boy Meets World. Very good. Okay, what's the next one? That 70s show, yes. I didn't get into that one myself, even though I was from the 70s. I just didn't care for that show very much, but that was about friends. How about this one? That was really popular back in the 90s, wasn't it? This one? How I Met Your Mother. I was going to get a little worried there. How about this one? Big Bang Theory. That one just ended its last run during this COVID stuff. And then, of course, the most popular, probably one of all, Friends, right? Friends. That word there describes what we're going to talk about today, and probably what might be the most famous friendship in the world. And that's the friendship between David and Jonathan. And I'm going to show you today how their friendship is just a great example of what a true friend is. So, as we look at that, you remember, we did a series earlier this summer on David, and we didn't talk about Jonathan at all. And I could have probably slid that in there, on this one today in there, but I didn't. But we knew that, David was on the run because of King Saul, who was eaten up with jealousy. And the people respected Saul, but they loved David. And David tried to build a bridge with Saul. But Saul just kept on burning it down because of his jealousy. And it was obvious that if the king turned against David, then the whole entire nation could turn against David. So God brought David, at that moment in his life, the one thing that he needed the most, a true friend. If you have a true friend, a true blue friend, you are very rich, because not everyone has a true friend. Everyone needs a true friend. And I've learned that though you make a lot of acquaintances in life and you don't really make good, close friends, you have a lot of people that you hang around. And I believe that next to family, There's not a more important part of your life than the relationship that you have with your friends. And David and Jonathan teach us the value that comes from having and being a true friend. And I want to show you why they had that friendship, because they teach us how to be a true friend, and they teach us how to have a true friend. And so a true friend, and this is what we're going to talk about today, a true friend accepts who you are, but also helps you become who you should be. They accept who you are, warts and all, but they also help you become a better person. And in Christianity, they help you become the person that God wants you to be. So we're going to begin with one verse, and I'm going to be jumping all around 1 Samuel today because the story covers a lot of chapters, and we, of course, won't have time to read it all. But I want to just kind of springboard off of this one verse in Proverbs chapter 18:24, and it says this: "Friends come and friends go, but a true friend sticks by you like family." What does it look like to have a true friend? What does it look like to be a true friend? Those are the questions we want to answer today. So before we begin, can you pray with me? Father, as we open our hearts to your word today, and as we take a serious look at our relationships, and especially those with our friendships, I pray, Father, that you would speak to us today through the friendship of David and Jonathan, to show us what we really can do to be true friends, and to make sure that the people that we surround ourselves with are true friends as well. So speak to us today, and we ask this in your name. Amen. Okay, the friendship of David and Jonathan. I'm going to give you 3 traits of a true friend that we can take from their friendship today. And like I said, we're going to jump around, but we're going to begin reading in 1 Samuel 18, verse 1, and you have the verses in your notes as well. But here's what it says. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. And from that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing, gave it to David, along with his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. So this is early on, before Saul, decided to kick David out and be on the run. This friendship develops between Jonathan and David. And verse 1 says that Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Now, when you literally translate that verse, it really says the soul of Jonathan was chained to the soul of David. Can you imagine that imagery? They were so closely knit together. They were what you might call soul brothers. Jonathan had the highest love that one person could have for another one, because we read Jonathan loved him as himself. So the first trait of a true friend is that a true friend loves a friend better than they love themselves. Jonathan loved David as much as Jonathan loved Jonathan. Before you can really love others, you have to learn to love yourself. And people who don't come across as loving usually have a hard time loving themselves. And Jonathan proved how much he loved David, and I want you to see how much he loved him. Think about this. Jonathan could have easily been jealous of David, just like Saul. Because as the son of Saul, he was the rightful heir to the throne. He was supposed to be the next king, but it was never to be. And he showed that his love and friendship with David was unconditional. He said, in effect, David, even though I know you're going to take my place as king of this nation, I'm going to be your friend for life. There are no conditions to true friendship. You realize that, right? If someone is your friend then they're not your friend. If someone is your friend because, then they're not your friend. If someone is your friend when, they are not your friend. True friendship is more than emotional, it's spiritual. And that's what happened here. This went far deeper than just an ordinary acquaintance. And I know this because of what we read in verse 3 and 4. It said Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. David and Jonathan made this blood covenant with one another to seal their friendship. Now, a covenant is more than a contract, because in a biblical covenant, you not only sign on the dotted line, but you pledge your life to that other person. So you can sign a contract with someone and never have a personal relationship with them. And you know this. Do you have a personal relationship with your mortgage company? You have a contract with them, but you don't have a personal relationship. They don't care as long as you make the payments on time, right? So this is why marriage is not a contract. Marriage is a covenant. And it's meant to seal the relationship between a man and a woman. And they made this covenant. Now, this covenant was so important because Jonathan was the next in line to be the king of Israel. And in an incredible display of commitment to David, he first off gives David his robe. Did you see that? He gave him his robe. That was the symbol of both his status as a prince and as the future king. Then he gives David his armor and his bow, which symbolized his role as the future commander-in-chief of the armies of Israel. And then he gave David his belt, which was really the chief ornament of a soldier. And it was only worn by the wealthy and by royalty. And it represented all that he could have as king. But he was giving it up to David. So in those acts, Jonathan gave to David the single most important thing one friend gives to another: all of his loyalty, all of his love, more than himself. See, there are different levels of relationship. There are acquaintances. There are people who you may get a Christmas card from. There are companions, people you work with, or people that you may live next door to or you serve in some organization with. But there are genuine, true friends who will stick with you and stay with you no matter what. A true friend will walk into your house when everyone else has walked out. A true friend is in your corner when you're cornered. True friendships. And one very important lesson to always remember is you cannot choose your loyal friends, who they'll be, but you can choose to be a loyal friend to others. You can choose to be a friend. You cannot choose to have a friend. And the friends that you choose to be your friends should be the ones who stick by you no matter what. That's a true friend. Now, in chapters 18 through 20, you'll find that there are 6 different times that Saul tried to kill David, until David finally was forced to become a fugitive on the run. And you can read that later. But on one occasion, Jonathan saves David's life by informing him that his dad was trying to kill him. And in a secret meeting there's this incredibly moving departure scene, because they know they probably won't see each other again. And as God would have it, they did see each other, but David was on the run from Saul, and the next time they did see each other, he was out in the wilderness being hunted by like a wild animal. And if you skip over to 1 Samuel 23, verse 14, this is what happens. It says, David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph, and day after day Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. And look at what Jonathan said. Don't be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel. I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. So at any moment, Saul or one of his men could spring up behind a bush or a rock and kill David, and most likely kill Jonathan for being a traitor. What does Jonathan do? He encourages his friend. When David is at his lowest, he lifts him up. So here's another trait of a true friend. Remember this. A true friend lifts a friend higher in life. A true friend builds the other friend up. A true friend encourages. A true friend motivates the other friend to do better and to be better. That's why in Proverbs 12:26 it says, "The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray." Why is it so important to be careful in the kind of friends you choose? And again, we talked about this last week. Wise friends will make you wise. Foolish friends will bring you harm. So let me just give you a little bit of advice on how to evaluate your friends. 3 questions you might want to ask yourself. 1, do they bring out the best in me or the worst? Do they bring out the best in me or the worst? When you're around them, are you a different person? Are you a better person? Are you worse? Here's another question. Am I better for being around them or worse? Do they make me a better person? And sometimes you can ask someone else you're very close to, and they'll tell you, no, when you're around them, you're a different person. You're a totally different person. And here's another one. Do they motivate me to do more or less? Because a true friend will build you up and motivate you to do more and better. A true friend lifts a friend higher in life. Make sure your friends are encouraging you to be better. Now remember back in chapter 18, verse 1, we read that Jonathan became one in spirit with David and their souls were chained together. What was it that knitted them together so quickly? So think about this. Jonathan had seen David step out on a battlefield at 15, 16 years old. And he stood out on a battlefield where no one else would step out, fight a giant that no one else would fight. And he did it for one reason, his incredible trust in God. You remember, and we talked about this in the series on David, where David just said, "How dare you defy the armies of the living God? Who do you think you are?" He had an incredible trust in God, even at a young age. And Jonathan saw something in David that Jonathan had in his own heart. And just 4 chapters earlier, there's this story of how Jonathan had decided that the Philistines and Goliath had bullied Israel long enough and something had to be done. And he goes against the Philistine all by himself. And he has the same spirit that David had. Here's what it says in 1 Samuel 14. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother, Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. Whew. That's a lot of mouthful right there. But no one was aware that Jonathan had left. And on each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One cliff was called Bozez and the other Sina. And one cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, the other to the south toward Geba. And Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost to those uncircumcised men." Now that phrase right there, do you remember what David said to Goliath, about Goliath? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And here's Jonathan saying, let's go to the outpost of these uncircumcised men. Basically saying these men are totally anti-God. He says, perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Do all that you have in mind, his armor-bearer said. Go ahead. I'm with you, heart and soul. Now, you can read about it later, and I hope you will. But God gave Jonathan a great victory that day, and by himself, he killed 20 Philistines. Jonathan had that same heart for God and that same trust in God that David had. And that's what knit them together. And here's where we learn the secret of true friendship that really lasts. The secret to true friendship is not just finding someone like yourself. The secret to friendship is having a heart for God and then finding other people who also have a heart for God. That's the secret of true friendship. Write this down. A true friend leads a friend closer to God. A true friend leads a friend closer to God. This is why David and Jonathan loved each other so much, because they loved God so much. David was a more godly man for having Jonathan. Jonathan was a more godly man for having David. They loved each other more than they loved themselves. They loved each other to go higher in life. They led each other closer to God. That's true friendship. And I don't know how many times my dad quoted this verse to me when I was younger, but 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Did your parents ever quote that to you? But it's still true. Bad company corrupts good character. You need to be careful who you choose as your closest friends, those who will draw you closer to God, not farther away from God. You need to be with people who will increase your potential to serve God, not decrease your potential to serve God. A true friend leads a friend closer to God. And so as we close this real short series and this message today, remember this: a true friend accepts who you are, but also helps you become who you should be. Does your friend love you better than they love themselves? Do they lift you higher in life? Do they encourage you and build you up? And most importantly, do they lead you to God? And you may be sitting there saying, "Wow, I wish I had a Jonathan in my life." Well, you can have a Jonathan in your life if you will be a Jonathan in someone else's life. The best way to have a true friend is to be a true friend. So I want to leave you today with a challenge. And that challenge is this. In the next 30 days, so that's going to be around my birthday time, find someone that you can be a Jonathan to. Find someone that you can build this kind of relationship with, that you can love more than yourself, that you can lift higher in life, that you can lead closer to God. Now, I will tell you this, one of the best, fastest ways to do that is to get involved in a small group. In one of our life groups around here, they meet both hours, in all ages. And that's where you can find someone who's going the same direction you are, and you can build a relationship. I've been in a small group of about 8 couples for the last 10 to 15 years. And those people are people that I can call any time, day or night, when I need something. And they're people who love me better than they love themselves. They're people who always are lifting me up higher. They're encouraging, building me up. But they also, when I'm around them, they lead me closer to God. Those are the kind of friends we need. Those are the kind of friends we need to be to others. So that's my challenge to you, is to find someone that you can be a Jonathan to. Now let me say this. When people walk out of our church, whatever else they say, they ought to know that they just walked into one of the friendliest churches in the world. And I know many of you have said that to me. Man, y'all are one of the friendliest churches I've ever been in. And that's very intentional. It's not fake. We want people to know that they're loved and that they can connect with God. People are looking for true friendship. And I'll tell you something. A lot of times, The only physical contact a person has is on Sunday when someone shakes their hand or pats them on the back or gives them a smile. People are looking for true friends. I believe they can find them here at Creeks Inn. There are people here that need a Jonathan. They need someone who's a true friend. One little personal story and I'll close. Back when I was in high school, my senior year, the last part of my junior year, I ran for president of student council. Now, my junior year, I was vice president of student council, so it was kind of a natural progression, to run for president. And it was pretty much a done deal because you had been vice president. You know how it is. So I remember this is high school, okay? So I decided, okay, I'll run for president. And, I was probably, I wouldn't say this back then, but I was, as an athlete, you have a popularity contest going on between athletes and so forth. So I was the athlete of the bunch, and so we all had our signs and stuff made, the slogans. It's like an election: don't sob, vote Bob, those kind of things. And so I was running this campaign, and I was running against a new guy. And this guy had just moved from California that year. He had long hair like Jesus, and he drove a Good Times van. And so he was running, and nobody knew him, so it was like I had it made, okay? But then something happened along the way. A third person entered the race. And it was my best friend, Milton. We called him Corky. That's his nickname forever, Corky. Now, Corky was one who I hung out with on the weekends. We played football together. We did everything together. And he was my best true friend. He was the best man in my wedding. He was just that kind of friend. But he was running against me for president of student council. And I'm like, Corky, what are you doing? You know you're going to lose. And he said, I just wanted to do it. Just wanted to do it for the heck of it. I said, okay, may the best man win, and we know who that is. So the campaign went on, but something really bad happened along the way. As we began to run against each other, our friends began to polarize. And all of a sudden, there was this, my friend saying this, and his friends saying that, and it really started to hurt the relationship between me and Corky. So when it came time to have the election day, we all had to give our speeches. And I happened to be last, and Jimmy Couch was the California dude. He went first, and then Corky went. And then it was my turn. And while they were talking, there was just something inside of me that says, this is not right. This is my friend, and it has hurt our friendship, and I just don't think I can do this. And so just impromptu, I got up and stood up, and I said, look, I'm sorry. I'm withdrawing from the race because my friendship with Corky is more important than stupid student council president. And Milton couldn't believe it. Corky couldn't believe it. But, I just said, this is the way it is. I can't take this. And immediately our bond became stronger. And I'll be dog. You know who won? Not Corky. That stupid California kid with the long hair, because our votes were divided. And we took 2/3 with us, and he won. So he was the president. But I will tell you this, I don't care who was president, Corky and I remain friends. He didn't marry until he was 50 years old. But guess who was at his wedding? I was. Don't you wouldn't you like to have a true friend like that? You can, but you have to be one as well. I want us to close together in prayer. And in just a moment, I'm going to pray. If you'll bow your heads with me. And I don't know how God has spoken to you today. Maybe if you're a Christ follower, maybe he has somehow in your thought process put a face, a name to say, hey, he's not your true friend. She's not your true friend. They do not lift you higher. They do not lead you closer to God. You need to reconsider. And as we said last week, one of the most loving, compassionate things you could do is possibly to withdraw, because that person could end up hurting you. So I don't know what God wants you to do today. Maybe it's that he's the opposite. You haven't been a true friend to him. You haven't been a true friend to her. Maybe God's dealing with you about being the Jonathan that you need to be. I don't know. But whatever it is, are you willing to do whatever it takes to make it right? Now, if you're not a Christ follower today, if you're here today, you've never accepted Christ, you never started a relationship with God, I want to tell you something. There is no better friendship you'll have than with Jesus Christ. He died for you on the cross, which means he loved you more than he loved himself. And as you walk with him, as you follow him along the way, he builds you up, he lifts you up, he shows you what you're supposed to do, why you're here, gives you purpose, direction, and he leads you closer to himself as you spend more time with him, and eventually leads you right into eternity with a God who loves you. So that may be where you are today. And I hope that you have the courage to start that relationship. And it begins by having Christ come into your life. Forgives you of your past. You begin to walk with him, and that friendship is one of the best you'll ever know. And you can do it in your own way, your own seat. Just whisper a prayer. God, please save me. Thank you for loving me more than you loved yourself, giving your life for me. I want to follow you. I want to be friends with you. I want to serve you. I want to do everything I can to be what you want me to be. If that's you, I hope you'll be willing to take that step. Father, I pray that you've spoken to every heart here today about the relationships they have with their friends. And I know for some people, there are maybe some very difficult conversations that need to take place. And there's some very difficult actions that need to be done in either being a Jonathan or removing someone who's not a Jonathan. So, Father, I pray that our friendships would be honoring to you and that they would draw us closer to you. And I pray for anyone here who needs to establish that relationship with you, that friendship with God that comes through Jesus Christ. I pray they have the courage to do that. Thank you again for being our best friend. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.